Hi, I'm Dr. Sheldon Horowitz here at the National Center for Learning Disabilities. Thank you for joining in this next of our Ask the Expert series videos. What I'd like to do today is reflect a little bit about pockets of strength. And what I mean by that is that we've done a whole series of videos and we have lots of information on our website, LD.org, talking about the characteristics and features of what constitutes the struggle for individuals who have learning disabilities, attention deficit hyperactive disorder, Asperger syndrome, and nonverbal learning disabilities, and autistic spectrum disorders. And thinking about them as disorders is probably a good thing to do because it helps us discover and identify the kinds of interventions, the kinds of attention, the kinds of activities that we need to be committed to help these individuals succeed in society, in school, at home, in the community, and in life. But I think another way of framing this, and what I'd like to do today, is talk about each of these different types of disorders and just reflect for a minute on what types of strength might also be part of these individual disorders and the packages of skills and characteristics and features that come along with them. I know this is a generalization, and I don't intend to generalize about any of these or individuals who have these different types of disorders. But what I'd like to do is just sort of frame the notion of each of these disorders, LD, ADHD, Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities, and autism spectrum disorders in a way that isn't disorder focused, but that comes at it from a sense of neurodiversity. And what I mean by neurodiversity is that everybody has certain strengths and everyone has certain weaknesses. All of these different kinds of skills and disorders and the features that feed in and roll up into them occur on a continuum. So there are those individuals who are very mildly affected by some of these disorders. They have features, but the workarounds for them are pretty easy. And there are those who struggle dramatically and whose disorders are really severe and much more intensive in terms of the needs that they need to accommodate and succeed in other ways. And when we talk about neurodiversity, we also talk about competence. Whether someone is viewed as competent doing something in society, whether it's reading or whether it's building or whether it's communicating, it really is very much dependent upon the culture that they're in. So a child who is not particularly demonstrating high levels of competence in school may be extraordinarily competent on the ball field or in a work situation where they're using their hands and not necessarily using their verbal skills or their writing skills. Very much dependent upon the situation within which we ask those people to do certain kinds of things. So when we talk about pockets of strength and neurodiversity, the kinds of things that individuals with LD often demonstrate are a very acute, a very highly honed sense of visual spatial detail. Not in the language areas necessarily, but in the visual discrimination areas, in the areas of 3D learning. These are individuals who, for example, can be very talented as adults in the surgical arena, in medicine. Architecture is an area where many individuals with LD excel because a lot of the skills that they need to be successful by virtue of who they are and their LD are not mapped onto the language as much as mapped onto the ways that they perceive the world and the way they prefer to process information in that visual spatial domain. Because they've struggled and because they've had to find ways to succeed in those kinds of situations in a culture of school, they're often very hardworking. They're often very empathetic to other people who struggle, and they often are able to get the big picture and see linkages between one idea and another without actually having to demonstrate competence in each of those individual areas. When we think about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, individuals with ADHD are often understood to be and celebrated as being out-of-the-box kinds of thinkers. They're risk takers, they're very original in the ways that they understand and put things together, they can be very creative, And by virtue of their ADHD, they can also be like a dog with a bone, very dogged, very stick to it. They may flip back and forth, but when they get an idea, they often pursue it and they stick with it until they figure out a solution. When we talk about Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities, these individuals and some of what constitutes the characteristics, the neurodiverse characteristics that actually lead to strengths or might actually contribute to their successes, are that they focus on detail. That's who they are as individuals with Asperger syndrome. They focus on detail, they have great memories for certain kinds of details. These individuals with Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disabilities are often very diligent when they begin a task or focus on a task, and can work successfully and for long periods of time without a lot of direct supervision. They're very logical thinkers, and they often have the ability to filter through a lot of the clutter without letting the emotional aspects of the environment and decision making get in the way of their seeing what it is that they need to do and what kinds of things they can do to succeed. And in the autism spectrum disorder area, when we think about the neurodiverse characteristics of those individuals, they're often able to look at an object or a situation and hone right in on its function. How does this thing work in relation to me as an individual, but also what is it supposed to do and how might it function differently or better? They can be very persistent to task, very much focused, very much solution-oriented in many ways because they're focused on wanting to get something for themselves or getting from point A to point B to benefit the situation that they're in. And again, like individuals with Asperger syndrome and nonverbal learning disability, often what they do and how they make judgments, how they behave, is not clouded by either convention or by emotions. So when we think about these different disorders, when we think about pockets of strength and how they fit into this concept of neurodiversity, the question we should be asking ourselves is not just what are these disorders, what constitutes the things that these individuals struggle with, where are their particular areas of weakness, but we should also be saying what is different about the type of order that they use to filter and understand the world around them. And the kinds of questions that we can help them understand are, well, who am I as a person and as a learner? How can I engage in meaningful ways with my peers, with adults, with others in my community? And very importantly, how can I contribute in some meaningful ways as well? For more information about each of these disorders, and certainly for information about learning disabilities, please be sure to visit the LD.org website.